This is Rockin' with Jam Man, and today I'm interviewing the Sweet. So, how you guys doing today?
We're doing good.
So, next year marks 20 years since you guys became part of this chapter of Sweet. There have probably been thousands of stories written about the fact that there are different versions of this band. Now, before we get into any controversy, what is the one thing people writing about this situation consistently get wrong about you and Steve Priest actually built this band?
Well, I think the first thing is that Steve was the founder along with Brian and Mick Tucker. So that's the first thing, and a lot of people don't really realize that the careers that Stevie and I both had before we met Steve Priest. So we're part of the lineage we feel of the whole situation. But to answer that question, Steve was excited to really come out what he believed. He just was not happy with the way things were rolling. He was asked to partner up with Andy again, and he didn't want to do that. He didn't like the way it was being represented, so he enlisted us. And so that's the bottom line is that when he right before he passed, he was just excited that we carried the torch, just like Leonard Skinner and a lot of bands are. So there's always going to be those opinions, but we're past that now. We're past that hump. 20 years of doing this. There's really no need to talk about controversy. We don't carry, our fans don't have a lot of controversy. There's people, you're always going to get haters on that or people that, and they're entitled to their own opinion, but we're way past that. We've got an incredible band together and we carry the torch for Sweet. We're excited about it. And there's really not too many versions. You've got Andy overseas and you've got, our version that handles a very big area to carry on the torch for the incredible band, the Sweet.
Now, Steve had spent decades away from touring before putting his suite together. He could have hired musicians, played the hits, taken the money, and gone home. Instead, he stayed with you guys for years. What did Steve have to see in another musician before he considered that person worthy of representing Sweet, rather than simply being somebody capable of playing Sweet songs?
It's a great
Well,
question.
let me answer this one, Steve, because I basically I was working with Keith Emerson at the time when I played with Steve
Mhm,
at a it was a charity event.
mhm.
And at that charity event, I played with Slash and Lukather, Steve Lukather, and Keith Emerson. I was in a band, and Bobby Kimball was there, and everybody. And so we were already well-known musicians.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing for Steve. And then, of course, with Stevie, I'll let Stevie answer the question with what he was doing and why Steve chose really to make us partners because that's what we are. We're partners in the brand along with the family. Go ahead, Stevie.
Yeah, we were brought in as partners. Steve had a he wanted high caliber musicians. He wanted people that were gonna represent the not only the brand and the songs, but to move forward with it, with with having it really in your heart. That's what we do. We bring these songs to people the way that it needs to be done, and it's really simple. If you want to come and see the songs get played, we're who you want to see.
Now, this is something I don't think gets asked specifically enough. When Steve was alive, did he ever sit with either of you down and explicitly talk about what he wanted to happen to this band after he was gone? Not what people have interpreted since. What did Steve himself tell you?
Boy, he never thought he was going to die, so he didn't talk about that up until the time that we went to do a show in Minneapolis in the middle of the winter, and he came home with a really severe case of pneumonia. He went
Mhm.
in the hospital. He was on a respirator for 6 months until he passed away. So there was very little time for any discussion of what the future of the band was going to be. We all just knew what it was anyway. It was, we were bandmates, we were partners, we were Sweet.
No, I have to bring up something extremely current. Andy Scott gave an interview that made news yesterday, and he said that a version of Sweet continuing in America without anybody from the classic lineup really isn't right. Now, you two are the people he's talking about. I'm giving you the floor here. What is the strongest argument Andy has, and where do you believe his argument falls apart?
Well,
I think I think we already, stated it. I mean, uh, it falls apart because we have the name, we had that area. Steve did want us to continue on. He did bring that up to me the last time I saw him, and he wanted this to be represented because this was the band that he put together. So, Andy's up there and he's very limited where he's playing. He's mainly doing Germany and so forth. So I don't see what the big rub is for us to. A matter of fact, I think it's an incredible thing, and it actually puts it promotes his brand as well. We're over here doing our thing. He does it there. We're not really stepping on him. I don't see what the big rub is.
Now, Andy specifically criticizes Steve's decision of to create a trust involving his family. From your perspective, what was Steve actually trying to protect or guarantee when those arrangements were made? And was this always intended to make sure his version of Sweet could outlive him?
his family trust was in place for years. They have their own assets. They've been very successful, he and his wife. And the family trust is just simply, I have one with my family. It's all it is it's a very ironclad form of a will, a form of a family trust. Everything belongs in the trust, and what it does is it keeps you out of probate court when you die. So the trust has, very little to do with anything other than protecting his family and the brand of Sweet, which he owns the name for, and the family trust owns the name and license it with us, and that's the decision. It didn't come lightly. We didn't just decide this 1 second after Steve passed away. It took a long time for us to even get to that discussion. We lost a dear friend. And personally, I'm happy Andy plays. I wish him all the best. I hope his health is well, and that's great. But this is a time in life when the classic rock band people are, they're not getting younger. They're passing away left and right. And if people want to continue to enjoy listening to the way that this music, all the classic rock music, is supposed to be played and done, and you're guaranteed to have a good time and a great representation of the music, then this is what's happening with lots of bands, not just Sweet. So if Andy's got some kind of a chip on his shoulder, that's his own problem. We're not out to try to make any enemies. We're not out to try to outdo anybody. All we want to do is play these songs the best we can and go continue collecting more fans, and it only does good for everybody involved, from the original members and their families and their family trusts, because if we don't go out there and play, the music dies. It's that simple.
Now, Richie, Andy has made way more personal accusation. He has publicly said that he heard the drummer in this version of Sweet give interviews in a way that made it sound like he was the drummer on Ballroom Blitz. Richie, that's clearly aimed at you. Did you ever say anything or imply that you played on that original recording?
No, never have.
Then I just want to make this completely clear. Are you saying Andy Scott's accusation about you is false?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I never said that I played on Ballroom Blitz, the original. That would be
I'd like
ridiculous.
to.
I love
I'd like to see it. If somebody, I'd like to see that, because there's no way any of us would make that claim. That's outlandishly ridiculous. That would be completely lying.
Now, Steve Priest unquestionably had the credibility to call his band Sweet because Steve Priest was sweet. But after Steve died, that automatic connection kind of disappeared. What is the best argument for why his authority transferred to you rather than ending with him?
We became partners. So Steve right away. The only reason I decided to join Sweet is because I had a great career going. I was in a lot of different things. I had many projects, and Steve thought I was on a very high level. He came out of retirement, and when he offered me a partnership, and then Stevie following, we said, okay, we're going to be partnership with his band, and that's the only reason we did it. And we've invested all these years into this, so it's investing, and we've gone a career path. Not saying that we don't do a lot of other things, but Sweet is a big part, and we just love the music. We just think that, and we really honor Steve, and we really believe 100% in the music, and we just love doing the show, and the fans love it too. We don't hear anything, when we play for thousands and thousands of people, and millions over the years. uh, People stand in line to meet us because they're just anxious. It's not all about, it's all about us and participating in the future of Sweet.
Now, Andy says that he could still tour America, but might have to call his group something like the UK Suite. Imagine that happens. His suite and your suite are playing the United States simultaneously. Now, I know you guys said before you guys aren't really trying to seek a competition. Now, would that just be more confusing, or would you just simply let the audience decide which version they would like?
Hey, Starship is doing it right now with Mickey Thomas and the other Starship. I mean, have at it. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Great
We
White.
Yeah, I mean, but we don't have that. He's across the Atlantic, and he does Australia, and we do Canada a lot. And God bless him, man. Come on over. I don't think that that's going to, it might create confusion, but he's got, a huge, I mean, let's face it, Germany and parts of Europe was the biggest Sweet stronghold over in Europe, and he keeps busy with a lot of shows over there. So, there you go. He sounds like, I don't know where you're getting all this information of. So maybe I haven't seen the interviews. He hasn't taken, it sounds like he's really taken things personally again now. And we let the years of 20 years just roll off of us. I again, he sounds like he's upset if that's what you're reporting to us.
Now, this is a question for both of you, and you guys can answer separately if you guys would like. If Andy Scott called you guys tomorrow and said, let's forget the lawyers, forget the trademarks, and let's just sit down and privately and just let this talk, would you want to take that meeting with him, or would you not even?
There's no lawyers in the first place, and there's no issue with trademark. There's nothing to go over on that. That's already a solid thing. Go ahead, Stevie. I'll let you take it up from here.
Yeah, there is no legal issue whatsoever. We are legally allowed to use the Sweet brand. And since Richie and I had put all those years in, and people know that we were there with Steve, and as a matter of fact, Steve and I were very, very close. I did everything in my power to try to help him in his career and help this band move forward, and I still do. And so there is no dispute regarding lawyers or anybody suing anybody for anything. There isn't anything anybody can sue anything for, you know. If there starts to become some kinds of slander, that's another story. But we got no problem, man.
Now, unfortunately, every legacy band eventually runs into this question. So let's forget Sweet for a moment. 50 years from now, if nobody on stage ever met a founding member, when does continuing a band's name become legitimate preservation? And then when does it become just more of an exploitation?
That's cool, man. I think that it's going to become necessary and not exploited. There's like the ink spots, or there's like the fifth dimension. There's a lot of bands that are continuing onward with the brand. These heritage bands that had such an impact on society in the 70s, the 60s, 70s, maybe the early 80s ish. it's become household brands. So there are certain people that have, I would say, the lineage to be able to carry it on, and that would be all up to whoever the family is that owns the name of the brand or that owns the brand. With Leonard Skinner, it's Ronnie's wife. She decides who gets to go be Leonard Skinner, and that's the bottom line. So these things are happening. They're happening a lot now. We're going to see a lot more of it. Fans get a little confused and upset because they really love their original bands. But the fact of the matter is, we're moving on in time. So if we're going to keep these classic rock, these heritage bands, these songs alive, then we're going to have to let it become brands, just like the original people from Kellogg's cereal aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
But it's still a brand. The Budweiser beer is still a brand. All these things, it's becoming, this is what it is. They're businesses. We are a business. We're a corporation. So is Andy, I'm sure. And so it's about keeping, food on the table and making fans happy.
Now, Sweet Dream is fascinating because this isn't just simply
Thank you.
covering an old Steve Priest song or a composition. Steve is actually credited on the recording while Stevie arranged and produced it, and
Yes,
Richie co-produced it. When you
yes,
brought
he
it
did too.
into a 2026 Sweet recording, how did you decide which parts were yours to change and which parts were just untouchable because Steve wasn't there to approve them?
We recorded that song together to begin with. The any recording of Sweet Dream has Richie, myself, and Steve Priest on it. And then there are some other versions that have other people. So being as that we have control and every right to use likenesses, sounds of any recordings and all these things, we are able to decide what to do with it. And so, of course, the first thing we did was uh, we kept Steve's parts alive, and we built a track around that, and that's how we went about it. So Steve is in fact on the track. I produced it around that, keeping his parts and the vibe and all that together. Richie also produced it, by the way. We did it together. We always discuss these things, even though I tend to mix it, it's still both of us that do it. We decide these things together. We're an amazing production team. We're amazing, producers. We've become extremely good at it. And so that's what happened with that song. We kind of unfortunately rushed it out because we wanted to release it on Steve's birthday. Maybe we should have waited a little longer and done a better push on it. That might have been something that could have been rethought of, but that's what I have to say about that piece. I think that Ari sang really, really great. I think everybody played the shit out of it, and it turned out beautiful.
And we sent it to the family too to get their blessing as well before we released it. So, and it's not just Maureen, but it's also the daughters as well. So it's very important that we're one united family, so to speak.
Now, when you heard the completed Sweet Dream from beginning to end for the first time, did it feel like a new Sweet record, or did it feel more like kind of like finishing a conversation that the three of you never got to finish?
You're a pretty cool interviewer, dude. You got some good questions. It felt there was a point when all of a sudden the song took on its own life and it became a new recording, but it still had us in it, and it still um, extended the conversation creatively between the three of us, Richie, Steve, and myself.
Now, is there more unheard Steve Priest material sitting somewhere? And if there is, what
Maybe.
what test would a song have to pass before you would say we're allowed to finish it rather than just leaving it alone?
It'd have to be amazing.
All right.
It'd
So
have to be, so we have a lot of archives. We do. But these are things that you don't just do for the hell of it. It's got to come to you spiritually. It's got to talk to you. It's got to make sense. It's got to be something Steve would be right there and you feel it.
now, knowing Steve's personality, if he could hear everything being argued about the Sweet name today, which would bother him more? Somebody he didn't approve of carrying the name, or the possibility that Sweet simply disappeared after the original members were gone?
Well, there's not much argument. We don't get a lot of argument. I mean, I don't know where you get a lot of this information from. Uh, we don't have a lot of people basically in our face, and if they do, we just take them off social media because there's a lot of people that have their opinion and they have the right opinion. Like Michael Cataloni from Leonard Skinner. There's no original members. Just like when I went to see Foreigner uh, with no original members at the Hollywood Bowl, the audience loves the music.
Hmm.
That's all fans should be concerned with. Is say, wow, they are really keeping that name, those songs that we loved. But in Europe, people are upset, and because Andy's still moving along, and let's face it, he was the third guitarist, even though he was the main guitarist for pretty much all the big stuff that happened. Still, Steve loved us. We had a super tight relationship. So there was, after he passed, it took a little bit of time to think about, to reestablish, but we came to that decision that, and it's not about us being swayed by anybody, or there's not, it's not like we go to bed and go, oh God, there's an argument going on. We don't think like that, Jam Man. We
Hmm.
don't think like that at all. We're not thinking that way. We're musicians that were also very well known, played with the top musicians. I played with Sambora, Keith Emerson. I go down the list from Dio to everybody you can imagine. Okay. So, what I've established all the years of playing, people should recognize that just because I play in Sweet, I have my own identity. And so does Steve. Steve played with the biggest names before we met Steve Priest. So instead of being grateful, we're not just like unknowns, like maybe possibly, I don't know, the guys in Andy's band. I don't know how big those names are, uh, you know, but we do have a track record, and that's what really matters. So people should be recognize that we are already well established musicians, okay, and just be grateful for us carrying the torch. And if Andy wants to come over here, God bless him. Have at it, dude. Come on over. But what's this big competition going on? I don't see what the big deal is. He doesn't come over here. He hasn't been here for 25 years. I mean, why create this? Is this a bully thing? In our society, there's bullies, okay? And to all of a sudden somebody being jealous, or I mean, if he thought we were that bad, then he could bring that up. But if you see us playing and you see us delivering the goods, it's going to be real hard to criticize because we bring it on.
Mhm.
So enough of this bullying, enough of that. There's no legal contention for this. Let bygones be bygones. I mean, if we were going to do the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and he couldn't bring his band over here, would we get together with Andy and play our version with him? Absolutely. We have nothing against this guy. So it's what, a lot of the press wants to do. They want to create a big hassle. They want, I've had interviews where most of the interviews we do, Jam Man, has
Yeah.
been really great. And people don't ask these kind of questions about everything and the controversy. We don't get this. This is the first time I've heard this kind of hard questions that you're laying out here, except I did one other one. But no, we play, they hire us, we play big gigs, we play for tens of thousands of people. People love it. So, enough of this crap, enough of this. The world's already divided enough. We don't need to be taken to task about that were it's only the jealous musicians that don't play in front of tens of thousands that they might have that opinion. But if that's their opinion, God bless them. Good for them. They have every right to express themselves. It's a free world, hopefully. You know what I'm saying, brother?
Now, you've released Little Miracle, Insane, and now Sweet Dream. Apparently came together very spontaneously while you were already working in the studio. Now, that's really interesting because preservation is careful while great rock and roll usually isn't. How do you preserve Sweet without becoming so protective of the formula that you kill the recklessness that made Sweet interesting in the first place?
Very good. Uh, well, the new material that we've selected to release, it's because it has the recklessness.
Mhm.
It's because it has the angst. You know, the one thing is that we're never going to be those four guys that created what they created when they did Desolation Boulevard and they had their peak career. That's never going to happen.
Mhm.
That was a chemistry. If you were to take out anybody during that period,
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, when Brian, got wasn't able to sing, it changed the chemistry of the band a lot. Then Steve took over on vocals, and Andy stepped up in vocals, and it changed the chemistry of the band immediately, and that kind of was the beginning of the end. And so we, in no way, shape, or form, think that we can be that band. We're not. We are these people. We are these artists. We happen to carry the Sweet flag. So, amongst other things that we do in our life. But if we're going to release something under Sweet, it's got to have character. It's got to have some angst. It's got to be amazing, and worthy of people's ears, and that is where we're going into uncharted ground a little bit there, but we love to make records, and so we plan on continuing to do that, and we plan on continuing to do it with going into the archives and bringing out some things that were recorded many years back that Steve's on too. So just because we love our brother.
Now, Stevie, you've had years to dissect this music from the inside. If you strip away the clothes, the glam image, and even the famous songs, what is the musical DNA that makes something sound like Sweet? Is it the stacked voices, the strange chord changes, pop melodies over hard rock guitars, or is there something outsiders consistently miss?
It's a yes on all that, but a lot of it has to do with the production team.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, uh, Chin Chapman, Mike Chapman was a phenomenal. You know about Mike Chapman, I assume,
Yeah.
and he was a phenomenal writer. He only picked bands that he had songs that would work for. He loved the Sweet because he knew the Sweet knew a good song and knew how to handle it. And so there's that part of it. And then there's also whoever was, at the console recording, how they recorded, and the band themselves. They all had their individual strengths. And so the growth of the band, by the time they got to Desolation Boulevard, the band had already developed an awful lot of creative steam in the studio. So when they got to that point, everybody was on point.
Mhm.
And so the sound that became was the sound. That's why when I say there's no way we could be that, because it was a chemistry of everybody involved, from writers to engineers to even the drum tech, and everybody playing, and the studio they played in, and that's how that worked.
Now, Ari is now singing with the current lineup. Sweet has had enormous personality standing at the microphone over the years. When you're choosing a singer today, is the worst thing that that person could do is try way too hard to sound like Brian?
I'd
Go ahead,
say
Stevie.
I'd say yeah,
Huh.
Don't, that's one of the first things that we say is, you can hear Brian, and Brian was a phenomenal Scotsman singer, and personally I have an affinity to Scottish singers. They're just amazing, and so don't be somebody you can't be. We don't want a parrot. We want somebody who has their own identity. And when you come into this band, in which Ari so graciously did, accepted it, and took on the challenge, like, I think he's just unbelievable. He's so talented. I'm so glad that Steven Adler found him. Thank you, Stevie. And so, he's bringing his own self to this, and he loves this because he has the freedom to express himself how he is as his own artist.
Now, like you said, safe option where they play the classics forever and everybody already loves them. You guys keep making new records, which gives people something new to criticize. Which would embarrass you more, releasing a sweet song that completely bombs or reaching the end and realizing you became afraid to make anything new?
We're never going to be afraid to make something new.
Hmm.
Okay, so I guess a bomb would be embarrassing. Nobody wants a bomb, right? You go in and record because it's what you believe in your heart, and so you do your best job you can. And so if something's a bomb, then it hurts. It's not embarrassing. It just hurts. That's all.
Now, Richard, you said before you've played with musicians like Keith Emerson, Slash, Dio, etc. You also come from a background combining jazz technique, progressive playing, and hard rock. Now, Mick Tucker's parts can sound deceptively straightforward until somebody tries to reproduce that feel. What did Mick do behind the drums that you did not fully appreciate until Sweet became your job?
I always, I really didn't know Mick's work. I mean, when we played for Hurricane Katrina in 2007 or 2006 at this charity event with Slash and all these different folks, I played with all the different bands. And so I was given, okay, Steve Priest is going to come in and join us, and he's going to play Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run. So I knew those songs, but I really didn't know the back catalog. I was not, I was into a lot of other bands. I was a big Jimi Hendrix, Cream, a lot of other bands, and I looked up to a lot of jazz artists becoming. So I studied Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa, and when I met Roger Taylor back in many years before, we talked about his influence was Gene Krupa, and so when basically I just felt really when Steve heard me play, I didn't realize that that Mick Tucker was a big Ian Pace fan, just like
Mhm.
I am. I love Deep Purple. So Deep Purple was one of the things, and so basically I'll never play, even though I can do everything to a degree like Mick Tucker, as far as 30-second notes and everything that I do to be able to do it. I haven't heard a lot of other drummers be able to do what Mick does, but I can play because we come from the same background. You see,
Yeah.
and and so Mick is just I'm a shorter guy.
Oh,
Mick was this lanky guy that the way he played those drums, boy, it's just very unique. And so I love everything he does. He was just such a solid piece. I mean, that band just came out of nowhere. I mean, they were a lot of studio musicians were on the first recordings, but oh my God, when they started being able to do what they do, they knew what they were doing, and everything fit together perfectly with the four of them. So I have nothing bad to say about Mick or change what he ever did or look down on him at all.
now, another question for you, Richie. Earlier this
Yeah,
year, you had publicly told a terrifying story from your younger life involving an encounter connected to the Hillside Stranglers, partly
yeah.
because you wanted younger people to understand where drugs and dangerous circles can lead them. Now, you carried that story with you for decades. Why did telling it finally become more important than just keeping it private?
Well, over the years, I had told that story to a lot of people, and and basically, when you look at some of the things that happened in my life,
Yeah.
that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I've got a lot more other stories, and so they were starting to do a documentary on me, and I know somebody put up quite a bit of money to initially get it going, and they want me to do a book on my life story and so forth. But
Mm.
that story was just always like it just blew people away when they heard of what happened. So I grew up in Hollywood. The early days with Starwood and Randy Rhoads, right, and Van Halen. We used to outdraw Van Halen. I was with Satter with Chuck Wright on bass, and so we were a very popular local band. We toured with Alice Cooper. We played with Aerosmith. I'm 22 years old when I'm doing that kind of thing. So basically, what happened is it was during that time if you've ever heard of the Wonderland murders and around the Starwood, that those were heavy times. And what happened to me that night with the Hillside Strangler, when I heard MGM Plus
Uh-huh.
was doing a 4-part documentary, I said, I wrote a song, Running Down the Devil's Road, and it was my time to go public with it. And I wanted, because I have played that song when I've been at high schools and so forth to get kids aware of not doing drugs. What happened to me, and you know what? I know when they listen to me, I think some kids woke up because drugs are very alluring to artists. Oh, well, I'm going to smoke pot, I'm going to eat acid, I'm going to do this and that, and you start experimenting, and next thing you know, you might get in meth, you might get into cocaine. I mean, I went down a tough thing, and I was almost killed that night. So I thought it was value for me to tell my story.
Now, Stevie, you originally came into Steve's suite on keyboards. Today, you're
Yeah.
handling the bass, vocals, arranging, and production, and a lot of the responsibility behind the scenes. Out of all those jobs, which one has made you understand Steve Priest himself in a way you didn't understand him when he was alive?
But well, just playing with him and being on the road with him back in the days of him being alive, of course,
Yeah.
I handled a lot of it. I have for years, and so I've spent many, many late nights in the hotel rooms with Steve just talking. We became very close friends. He trusted me a lot. Steve did not trust people very often. That was something that he had. Those guys were dragged through the ringer a lot, and they were jaded, and they didn't trust a lot of people because there's always somebody out there trying to say that they got some great deal for you, and then all they're doing is taking advantage of you. So it was hard for Steve to trust people, but he trusted us. He didn't trust everybody, but he trusted us. He definitely trusted me, and I love him with all my heart. I know who he is inside and out, as the family does. That's that's the thing, and what we do today with Sweet, it's always to try to keep and uphold the standards and be the best we can be. We just got done doing an event, and we received the promoter said that we were the nicest people she's ever worked with. And
Yeah.
that makes everything. You know.
Let me add in with Stevie as far as switching from keyboards. He killed it on keyboards, and so when Steve passed, the family really felt like the only place to put Stevie because they were so tight is on the bass, and it was a big challenge. But boy, did he freaking nail it! And he would
Thank you.
stand over Stevie's bass. Stevie would stand over Steve's bass, and so he saw the technique, how Steve played. So he knew firsthand. I mean, when you get that kind of a view of exactly, and the notes, and when you play for
Yeah.
for well over a decade with somebody, you get to know every little thing. And so I think that's even to the same bass that Steve,
Well,
same
that's
basses that Steve plays.
that's why my wife and I went on a hunt for the same bass, because I used to do the sound checks for Steve, because often would not want to come down from his room. He wasn't feeling well. He needed to rest, so he had his energy for the show. So I would do the sound check on bass. I started to learn a lot of the material just doing that. And so I was used to that bass, and I carried it too. I brought it home. I had it at home. I used it here at home to record, and I just got used to that Tobias growler is what it is. And so I bought one. When we decided we were going to move on, the family wanted Steve's last bass, so I gave it to them, and they hung it on the wall. And my wife, I should say, found it. And I go out and we start doing our first shows. And the first thing people say is, "Oh my God, he's playing Steve's bass," like as if I just stole his bass, and that wasn't the case at all. It was all because I'm not I mean, I play bass, but to play bass in a band and actually be a bass player was another challenge. So I wanted everything as comfortable as possible so I could deliver the goods. And believe me, it took a little while to get there, you know.
Now,
Thanks, Richie. I appreciate what you said, brother.
Mhm.
Now, Blitz famously begins by calling out Steve, Andy, and Mick before the song explodes. Decades later, you're performing that same song while nearly every name connected to that moment is absent or part of this debate over who gets to carry Sweet forward. Does that make that intro hit a little differently now than it did when Steve was standing beside you?
Not really. I mean, we still have a Steve in the band, so that works. And if you really go on the internet and you hear all the bands that play Ballroom Blitz, they don't use those names. They use other names, whatever. And I've got a countrified version that's going to be coming out, and it starts off, "Are you ready, cowboys?" I mean, come on. "Are you ready, cowgirls?" I mean, it's come on, nothing's written in stone. I mean, people that copy the Beatles, they change arrangements, they do a lot of different things. So,
Yeah.
but you make it's an interesting point you make. Yes.
It's because that's who's in the band.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and that whole technique was taken from an old RB thing and jazz RB when they used to, are you ready, Slim? That kind of trip. And that's what they did with that song, which actually wasn't even anything like what the recording ended up when it was brought in as a demo. It was like a folk thing. And they didn't even know what they were going to do with it until Mick Tucker had that beat, and that changed the whole game.
Now, Steve called his autobiographic, Are You Ready, Steve? If somehow he got one final chapter to write about the years he spent with you guys and everything that happened afterward, what do you think Steve Priest would title that chapter?
It depends what kind of mood Steve
Yeah.
was in, because Steve, he vacillated so much. He could easily tell one person one thing and he would tell another person a completely different thing. He was incredibly an English, moody kind of guy. And so that's where things a lot of times there's some people out there that knew Steve that try to represent exactly the way or try to mischaracterize the relationship that Stevie and myself had with Steve. And boy, when we're on the road, boy, when we got together, it was nothing but love. There was nothing but who knows, with the moods that somebody in. So as that last chapter goes, we can't even fathom. I mean, that's an intangible, really.
And maybe it would be this: "Where are we going, Stevie?" So that's what he would say when we get to the airport. He would never remember where we're going. "Where are we going?" "We're going to Memphis." "Oh, I like Memphis."
Um, if you guys were on death row tomorrow, what would your final meal be?
Ribeye
On death,
steak.
Ribeye steak? All right.
death row,
Yeah.
I wouldn't eat anything. I think I'd be too upset to eat.
Well, if I knew I was going to die, it would be ribeye steak and some lobster on the side, probably.
Well, I have to say thank you guys so much for taking the time and speaking with me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, gents. Thank you so much again.
Jam,
Thank
man,
you.
you got a lot of good questions in there. Thanks for taking it to us a little bit. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.
Hopefully it clears. Hopefully we cleared some air.
Yeah, hopefully.
All
Thank you
right,
so
brother.
much again. You have a good one.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.